Hello, and welcome to another episode of AI in the Classroom Daily, a podcast helping educators make sense of AI without the hype. I'm Dan Cogan-Drew, and I use AI as a thinking partner in preparing each of these episodes because I think the best way to talk about AI in education is to work with it openly. So today's the last week of June. For most of you listening, school is out, your students are gone, whether to summer jobs, camps, family trips, just home on their devices. You'll see many of them again in September, but some of them you won't see again at all. They move, they graduate. Life goes on. Now, I want to take this moment to talk about something that I think gets missed in most of the conversations we have about AI, especially school-oriented conversations. This is not going to be about cheating or plagiarism. It's going to be about what your students are actually doing with AI when no one is watching, and what might mean when they walk back through your door in the fall. And they're going to have much more of that time this summer. Ethan Mollick, a Wharton professor we've talked about a lot, I think is one of the more clear-eyed observers of AI in the last couple of years, has said something that I find useful, if a bit haunting. The version of AI you're using right now is probably the worst version you'll ever use. What he means is that in terms of capability, AI tools are getting more powerful faster than almost anyone predicted. Whatever your students are picking up this summer, it's more capable than what existed last summer, and next summer it will be more capable still. I'm not saying this to alarm you, but I'm saying it because I think it raises a real question. What are students doing with all of that capability when no adult is in the room? A new piece of research gives us a much more detailed answer than we've had before. The Rithm Project is a nonprofit focused on human connection in the age of AI. In March of this year, they published a report called Youth, AI, and the Relationships That Shape Them. They surveyed 2,383 young people ages 13 to 24 across the United States. That's a nationally representative sample, to understand not just whether young people use AI, but how that use connects to their social lives, their friendships, and their sense of belonging. The headline number is that for about 45% of the young people surveyed, AI is already reshaping their real-life relationships. Not in a science fiction way, not robots replacing friendships. It's happening in much quieter, more gradual ways. Writing and polishing texts to friends, asking AI for help, navigating a fight with a family member, processing a rough day, a rejection, a moment of feeling lost. They're doing all of that with a chatbot instead of a person. Only 15% of respondents had built relationships with AI characters or personas, that kind of use that tends to generate the most alarm. The bigger story from this research, I think, is that more than twice as many students are using AI in ways that touch their emotional lives, and most of the adults around them have no idea. 53% of students in the study say teachers and the other adults never, or rarely, talk to them about AI. And when adults do bring it up, the conversation is almost always about academic integrity, cheating, plagiarism, and so on. Only 27% of students said an adult had ever talked to them about using AI for emotional support. The conventional picture of a student who is over-relying on AI for emotional support goes something like this. They're a lonely kid with a small social circle, no one to talk to, and they end up filling the void with a chatbot. But what this research is showing is that that picture is wrong, or at least incomplete. What the Rithm Project data actually shows is that the strongest predictor of risky AI use is not isolation. It's feeling like a burden. Students who have friends, students with full schedules and active social lives, are turning to AI in high-risk ways because they don't want to keep bringing the same problems to the same people. One participant, a 24-year-old man, put it like this. He said, "I started using it once I realized people got tired of me complaining about the same thing over and over again. And I didn't want to keep burdening people about the same issue." Researcher Kashyap Rajesh, a junior at Cornell who worked on the report, said it like this. The driver of risky AI use is not necessarily isolation. It's feeling like a burden to others. And that came through in the research. He described a gradual drift that many students experience. It starts with homework help, then drafting a text, then navigating a social situation, and eventually processing a breakup. Nobody wakes up and decides they want AI to be their emotional support system, he said. It just keeps feeling easier than the alternative. And so by the time you notice it, the habit is already there. Allison Lee, one of the lead researchers, was talking with a high school girl about AI and belonging, and the girl told her, Nobody dances at prom anymore. Lee asked why. The girl said, Instagram. If you try to dance at a prom, you're going to look stupid at some point. Someone will pull out a phone. You'll end up on a feed seen by the entire school. So everyone just goes to look nice, takes a picture, and leaves. Lee's takeaway was this. We've created a set of conditions where young people don't feel like they have permission to be their real, unfiltered selves. And into that space, where the cost of being imperfect in public has gotten very high, AI steps in. It doesn't judge. It doesn't get tired of hearing the same problem. It doesn't post anything. I think teachers probably recognize something in this dynamic. We talk a lot, especially in literacy education, about productive struggle, the idea that students need to actually wrestle with hard material in order to learn. And that offloading that work to AI short-circuits something important. Michelle Culver, the Rithm Project's founder, makes an almost identical argument about relationships. We worry, she says, that young people might offload the relational work to AI and become ill-equipped to handle the very messy human friction of real relationships. The academic version and the relational version sound to me like variations on the same problem. Students are avoiding the friction that builds skills in learning and in learning how to be a person. So what do you do with this as a teacher in late June when all your students have already left? Not much right now. The point here is not to spend your summer worrying about it. But I think when September comes and your students walk back in, there's something you can do differently. Again, Kashyap Rajesh, the junior at Cornell, made a point in the 74 article. He said that when an adult asks a young person directly whether they're using AI to process emotions or get support, not accusatorially, just as a real question, it signals to that student that the adult knows this dimension exists and isn't going to react badly. And he said that's the prerequisite for any real conversation. I think that's a pretty low bar. It doesn't require training. It doesn't require a curriculum. It just asks that you speak to a student with a different approach in those first weeks of school. You come to them with a question, not did you use AI to cheat, but something more like, what did you use AI for this summer? What did you find yourself asking it? And then listen. You're not being asked to become a therapist here. You've been the adult who noticed when a student was managing everything alone quietly without asking for anything. This is just a new version of that. I'll add a personal reflection here as a parent of two young men, one in college and one in high school. As I read this report, I began to wonder about this use that most adults have no idea about. The use and the adults. Are my kids doing this, and am I one of the adults who is clueless? To date, I have to be honest, I've asked them plenty about AI, but 90% of that was centered on academic work and whether they were using AI to complete assignments. I knew that AI posed a great risk to young people who would form unhealthy relationships with it, but I hadn't thought about the circumstances under which students were turning to it. My perception was very similar to the stereotypical assumption about the kind of young person who would turn to AI and why. The idea of young people feeling like they're being a burden to others has been really troubling to me since I read it. So let me close with a couple of questions, and I'd love your reflections about this dynamic and what you've seen with the young people in your life. Have you had a real conversation with a student this year about how they actually use AI in their personal life? That is not about cheating, but what it's been like for them. And if you did, what did you learn? As always, thanks for taking time to listen. I hope to hear from you in the comments, and we'll see you next time.